Mortal Kombat lives. Long ago, a small team at Midway managed to make a best-selling major franchise using digitized actors and whatever they had available to make something special. Exciting battles, visceral gore, and hidden secrets. Past its initial hype era, MK has had a series of highs and lows which have seen better days lately.
Don't I scare you in the least?
I see weird every weekend on Sunset.
Man, this franchise cannot get a break. It speaks for itself that hopes were and are particularly high for the future of the franchise, and this legacy collection by Digital Eclipse had a tall order from the start. Things unfortunately did not work out. On release, this game was a total mess. There were various emulation issues with certain games, seemingly missing content and options with no proofreading either. The online experience was raw. Worst of all was the input delay on console, which varied depending on the system, but you know it's bad when PSN offers refunds. Now, Digital Eclipse has had a solid work output in the past. Atari 50th, Wizardry, and TMNT the Cowabunga collection come to mind. I personally like their work. Their documentary features are great, but their porting just seems to be okay. When it came to fighting games or online play features, there were things left to be desired. Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection's launch was far worse in comparison. Although Digital Eclipse had been forthright in addressing and working on several issues and patches and hotfixes, the damage has been done. Fast forward to now, the game is at a basic competent level it should have been on launch, with more work currently underway. This review will cover the December patch of 2025 with the updated improvement, fixes, and online lobbies on the Nintendo Switch 2. Above all, play with the patch, even on physical. It's a must. MKLK features an assortment of several titles in the formative hype era of the series and a few extras. It features the core arcade games, the elusive never-before-released Ultimate Mortal Kombat free WaveNet, and a curated selection of ports and spin-offs. All in all, this content is a big deal, as previous collections and re-releases were usually limited to only the arcade games with basic features at that, so this is something entirely brand new for the series.
That was fun!
Mortal Kombat at the height of its popularity was put onto as many gaming systems as possible with varying degrees of success and playability. Some versions were awful experiences compared to the arcade versions but still sold copies. It can't be understated, MK hype was real. Mortal Kombat 1 is the classic game that started it all, with 7 beloved characters and a mix of fantasy, Asian-inspired mythology, and some sci-fi thrown in, all wrapped in violence. Mechanically, it plays less like Street Fighter and more like gory rock'em sock'em robots. These games are an acquired taste made in a time when the general standards of a fighting game weren't as concrete as they are now. Even if unconventional in several areas, the game today is still very approachable and fun. The arcade ladder is a blast, although I could do less with the endurance rounds, and the bosses are very cinematic for their time. It's also still pretty good whichever console port you choose, although Genesis has what Nintendo don't, as that version keeps its blood and finishers plus slightly better music and gameplay. The Game Boy handheld is particularly very stinky. Is this Scorpion or Sub-Zero? Great, now they're both Reptile. It eats up your inputs and I have no nostalgia to put up with it. The Game Gear version of Mortal Kombat 1 is a little bit more salvageable, it being a colorized experience with slightly better controls and the blood and fatalities at the cost of stages and characters. Mortal Kombat 2 is pretty peak as a follow-up, with some of the best fatalities, secrets, and Easter eggs and general atmosphere up against Shao Kahn and Outworld. The stakes are upped, the violence is increased, and the number of new finishers and additions to the cast made it very popular to play amongst players. That being said, it's a great game, but it's never been my favorite to revisit in solo play, as the arcade ladder is legendarily cheap and tedious to overcome. The difficulty toggles in the original games were pretty misleading and would ramp up pretty quickly and aggressively. In Mortal Kombat 2's case, its difficulty probably aged the worst in the whole trilogy, maybe even the whole quintology. You can cheese it, but the experience was and always will be best played locally with others. One improvement I appreciate most in this collection is the inclusion of fixed difficulty. The fixed difficulty options are a godsend, with 0 being actually fair and 9 being maxed out if you really know what you're doing. In the past, I've played through Mortal Kombat 2 in the arcade ladder, and I must say, it never made me want to revisit it again after I've gone through it the first time. Otherwise, in regular play after a certain point, expect perfect counters, read inputs by the AI, and a lot of quarters generally overspent in any variation of MK2. When it comes to the console ports of MK2, all of them this time around are pretty decent. Mortal Kombat 2 Super Nintendo is a classic fighting game on the system. Its presentation is great, its violence is uncensored, and its graphics are very faithful to the arcade experience. Ah, nostalgia.
Fatality.
I remember owning MK2 on a Super Nintendo back in the day, but I also remember not getting very far. It would have helped if I knew the cheat codes back then. Speaking of, I really do wish some of the games in this collection offered better explanations for codes and tricks. All the games in this series had awesome surprises, but they weren't obvious and some are very specific to perform. Mortal Kombat 2 Genesis is a different experience with that Genesis twang, differing, and slightly revised graphics, but it's certainly not a lesser experience. The creative use of differing allows for subtle detail with limited color values on the system, and the palette is particularly distinct. I didn't own a Genesis back in the day, but if I had, I would have loved this particular port. Mortal Kombat 2 32X is more arcade accurate on Genesis hardware with more frames of animation effects, but unless you're a hardcore enthusiast, it's pretty minimal tweaks as it's still on the Genesis. It's still an interesting port. 32X games aren't typically found in re-releases, and although there were imperfections in the port pre-patch, the missing sound effects seem to have been fixed. To my surprise, MK2 for the Game Boy is actually really good this time around and is way more playable than its handheld predecessor. Despite obvious cuts from the roster and limitations on hardware, the gameplay is very close and best of all replayable. Getting used to forward kick to roundhouse is a little weird, but the experience translates well enough all the way to Shao Kahn. No Kintaro here, unfortunately. Goofy graphics aside, I can see myself playing through this again. Mortal Kombat 3 broke new ground with the series with mechanically more depth than previous installments with the introduction of the Dial-A combo. It's basically a string of buttons that in succession make a specific combo. Alongside running as a mechanic, it's far more aggressive and faster paced. Another first in the series are the combat codes, which can be applied before a match for different modifiers. The results are chaotic, and luckily they are available in the Versus mode for easy access in the Legacy Collection. There are plenty of secrets and teases about Snoop Saibot and the inclusion of several new fatals and finishers like the animalities that are fun enough gimmicks. I say that mostly because they are kinda tricky to perform even back then.
Smoke wins. Animality.
This time around, Shao Kahn has decided to pull out a last resort in reviving his former Queen Sindel in Earthrealm, giving him a chance to invade from Outrealm. Some heroes are missing in action or even killed, but some new heroes have emerged in their place to put an end to this tyranny. The merged world of this invasion lends to some particularly memorable scenarios, and the music is just legendary, some of my favorite in the whole series. Mortal Kombat 3 is a bit less biting than the second game and features more controversial aspects like removing fan favorites like the ninjas, adding in cyborgs, and maybe too many humorous aspects compared to Mortal Kombat 2. The cast is great even if this game has some glaring omissions in the roster. Sindel, Shiva, Cabal, and Stryker are generally great additions, and long-absent characters like Sonya and Kano return with great redesigns. I generally like the newcomers in this game, but you gotta have Scorpion, man, come on. Mortal Kombat 3 would sow the seeds for modern NRS, but it rests debatably in an awkward place with its direction for the series. Mortal Kombat 3 is a good game in its own right, but lacks the refinement of its later more popular updates Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 and Mortal Kombat Trilogy. Now, it comes off that the limits of the console and the magnitude of MK3 were reaching their apex on the then current console generation. The Genesis and SNES ports are mighty crunchy looking experiences, the sound quality and color is greatly reduced, and the size of the sprites are adjusted for effect, but it's still MK3. Take your pick, I wouldn't say bad, but the word redundant comes to mind. Something that echoes in this collection a lot. At least an early playable Motaro and Shao Kahn exclusively in this mode has some mileage.
Fight. That was pathetic.
Now, when it comes to Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, I'm extremely biased. Its additions, adjustments in gameplay, and its general playstyle makes it one of my favorite arcade fighters. Even today, when I see an Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 cabinet, I just gravitate towards it. It is everything I mentioned from Mortal Kombat 3 and more. Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 ups the roster to 23 characters, reintroducing several new palette swap faces in the process. The game has been rebalanced and a bunch of interface visuals were redone, plus new moves were added to the characters. The new stages like Hell, Jade's Desert, or the Waterfront add much needed variety of scenery, which the previous game lacked. It's unfortunate we do lose the bank stage and various attract modes from the original game. On the bright side, there's new stuff like 2v2, more combat codes, and tournament mode. It really feels like Midway were adding as much as they could as possible in that arcade cabinet. To me, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 is the high point of the classic series, the update that MK3 should have been, and for all intents and purposes, the great filter between approachable tactics of earlier games and complex strategy of future games. What the hell does that even mean? For one, it's no longer pick up and play like the previous games. UMK3 has so much more mechanically going on. It's not the friendliest fighter as a result. Most people struggle with the combo strings while Unks will hit you with the double flawless fatality real quick. That's true for nearly all fighters, but when you can literally murder them afterwards, it hurts just a bit more. I find it that the arcade ladder isn't so bad this time around, but Jade and Sub-Zero are rather infamous. Luckily, there are plenty of tricks and exploits. Another quirk of this game is that it is really unconventional. Mechanically, the more advanced stuff like strings, jabbing, damage scaling, frame advantage, glitch cancelling, or just even holding back and block to stop a throw could even surprise most fighting game fans. Still, there's lots of actual depth and fast rewarding combat, which is excellent in its own right, and very few have actually managed to imitate it. Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 has flaws, especially the ones carried over from the base game, but it's absolutely worth playing in this collection. UMK3 on console is still a pretty good time, but definitely just as compressed as the MK3 ports and even a little bit rushed feeling. The inclusion of a playable Rain and Noob were huge, and they're pretty fun to play even if they don't have complete finishers. Unfortunately, Shiva was removed and Animalities as well, although we do have Brutalities, which is a first in the series. Worth mentioning, there is no Genesis version of UMK3 to compare. New in this collection is the WaveNet version of Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 for arcade, which was a revised update featuring adjustments and early online implementation. It also featured Noob as a hidden playable character. This game was never officially released as it was considered cost prohibitive and was lost media up until now. The game was tweaked to remove some infinites and adjust some gameplay instances, but without the online components active, it basically plays like offline UMK3. Noob is pretty broken and he's not fully realized in comparison to his later appearances, but he is a lot of fun. His arcade runs are hilarious as his teleport jump obliterates the AI. Good luck trying to see him in his Dolphin stage, it never changes. I can't even imagine the mirror match. This game is a cool inclusion, but not enough to tip it to the standard. Now, Mortal Kombat Trilogy is an offshoot of MK3 that's essentially a dream match title, featuring past omitted characters like Raiden, Johnny, and Baraka, and old stages from past games. Its inclusions like the aggressor meter, which nobody ever seems to like, and a bit faster engine changes up that formula.
Wait, there's lots of other characters if you don't like the Pixie Sorcerer.
No, there aren't. They're all just the same with different costumes.
Mortal Kombat Trilogy brings brand new moves, past versions of certain characters, and even more content than even the arcade had. It's a really fun game, but it's also a very rushed title when it was originally released, and there is some broken and busted stuff like you wouldn't believe. Trilogy just has so much ambition it's easier to forgive its faults, like the system limitations, half-finished and broken boss characters, and a whole bunch of glitches. It still surprises me for people who think that it's what Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 should have been. It's a matter of preference, especially if you're in the arcade scene or the console scene, but I still find that wild. This is a tweaked PS1 release with considerably less slowdown and pausing. Shame it's not the PC version or the N64 version though. One is the best port and the other had different notable content. Mortal Kombat 4 is a black sheep entry for the series. Although it was gassed up, the arcade hype had well reached its apex. Games like Tekken and Soul Calibur had already made their mark, and this game with its shift to 3D was rather dated looking even back then. The gameplay was a lot more generalized, featured some new mechanics like sidestepping, interactables, and weapons, but it was still positioned in a really rough spot. MK4 introduces many newcomers and locations as you'd expect by now. Some would prove more popular down the line like Shinnok, Fujin, and Tanya, but then there's replacements like Raiko, Kai, and Jarek. The less said about Jarek, the better.
Shinnok wins.
MK4 has some tight aesthetics, but they're held back by some poorly aged lines, choices, and designs. Some of this stuff is hidden comedy, and I can't tell what was intentional or not. MK4 certainly stumbled in its transition to 2D to 3D, where the shift of the franchise was clearly seen either by their general reception, company troubles, or just the general decline of arcades. MK4 Arcade, aside from its ports, hasn't been properly made available before, and some of that might be due to the Zeus hardware it's based on. The other ports of MK4 aren't here either, which is a shame because they had more content. The emulation in this collection seems to be imperfect with missing textures, shadows, and occasional glitches, but I have to be honest, this game was always kinda wonky. Hopefully the game can be patched further to address some of these bigger issues.
You will fail.
Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero feels more misunderstood than truly bad. The deaths are hilarious and it plays more like Prince of Persia. Mythologies is really a matter of perseverance against some very dangerous beginner's traps and very specific solutions to problems that are not always clear. Some levels can get pretty lengthy on top of mean-spirited, and damn is it easy to die. It's a lot of whiplash from fighting game Origins to get something like this, which is probably why we never got any more Mythologies entries. A really superb action-adventure series starring Mortal Kombat really wouldn't hit until much later, but Mythologies had some decent set pieces, the introduction of Fujin and Quan Chi, and minor RPG elements to boot. Have fun fighting the controls, but at least it has rewinds and save states in case you want to actually have help with this one. Mortal Kombat Special Forces is really just a mediocre action game starring Jax. It had a lot of problems behind the scenes that made the game what it was, and it shows. I find it really difficult to drum up more opinions about Special Forces as it's just not it. Jax deserved much better by far. A true stinker in this collection is Mortal Kombat Advanced. That one is truly diabolical. It may have Mortal Kombat free on its base, but play it for under a minute and be astounded at the jank, how awful it sounds, and how fast you'll die in a matter of seconds. Mortal Kombat Advanced is so bad that if it wasn't included in this collection, nobody would cry for it. The MK3 on something like the GBA was probably a tall order, but the system has done better, especially with fighting games. The game feels awful, the AI is relentless, and there's nothing that ever makes me want to ever play it again. The inclusion of Deadly Alliance and its Tournament Edition update are pretty impressive considering the hardware of the GBA. Both games are pretty competent with 3D movement on 2D sprites, fatalities, and even weapons. There's collectibles, endings, and even some replay value even if the roster is broken up between two games. I actually really like them for what they are, and I had more fun than I thought I would. The Tournament Edition is my pick between the two for having Raiden and Johnny. Even in the Deadly Alliance era, they do work. They were pretty later on from the franchise's early days, and I'm surprised they're even in this release to begin with, but they're good games. The added features of rewind, save states, filters, and move lists are very basic emulator features, but official releases in the past didn't have all those in one spot. It's all very convenient, although I did catch some mistakes. MKLK has a decent training mode and fatality trainer. This resource is particularly handy to play around with, especially if you want to get better or practice specific things. Versus mode is a cool feature offering single fights with adjustable settings, codes, and stages against the person or CPU. You can also get your match replays from this mode, which strangely isn't available for online. I'm surprised a lot of this stuff wasn't incorporated into the online lobbies, but we'll get into that in a second. All the multiplayer MK games, minus the handhelds, are playable online. Your experience will be very conditional, if not by the state of the collection currently, it's because these games are busted as originally designed. It's the Wild West out there getting glitch jabbed to death by an Unk in Ultimate, somebody whipping out the boss characters in Trilogy, or getting quit on prematurely just because you did a 5-hit combo on some noob, no Cybot. This is further compounded on the average online experience, which can be mixed. Sometimes online play is good enough and other times it's practically underwater. There are also wackier elements and instances that can break some sessions from the collection itself. It's imperfect, and the online lobbies at present are basic and need more features. Being able to kick out players, toggling rule sets or modifiers, changing input delay between matches, basic chat, it would all go a long way. Until then, fixing it up, improving emulation, and adding more features, and especially fixing up that online component is definitely ideal. Fingers crossed for crossplay if possible. This purchase requires homework. Offline, the collection is great, but if you're looking for online play, you may have to wait till the next patch. This game was missing a lot of polish that should have been on release, but it's in a much better place now. It's still worth exploring, and there's a great treasure trove of unique experiences here in this collection. Largely for classic fans. Consider it if it's worth it to you or not, or maybe just wait for a sale. Until then, it's just okay. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more at Sup Repo.